All right, good people. I have here two ALESIS HR-16 digital drum machines, which I got in a package deal at an auction because neither one of them works. We're going to see if we can fix them today. First things first, we have some history. HR-16. This is a drum machine from the late 80s. I think they started in maybe 88. Their whole jam was that they were a 16-bit sample-based Rompler drum machine. 16 bits, can you imagine? Mind-blowing. Sega Genesis quality sound. They were called the HR-16 because they were 16 bits, they had 16 keys, but they were pretty cool. They were aside from the fact that they look like an alien landing craft, which is pretty sweet, and that if they fail, you can use them as doorstops. They were much, much cheaper than the Lindrum products of that time. They came in two versions, right? So you had the HR-16, which is this one, and then one called the HR-16B. B for black. B was a darker colored case, and it contained better samples. These samples are so dorky. They're like the sounds of the early 90s. The black, the HR-16B was like more electronic sounds. But these are fun because you can swap out the chips. You could circuit bend the hell out of them. They have these super clacky Commodore 64 style pads that are a little bit velocity sensitive. I was trying to figure out who the famous users were, and there's not a lot of them, but apparently Arrested Development made their song Mr. Wendell, and the British industrial metal band Godflesh. So pretty diverse. I read also that there is actually one of these in the Smithsonian, or at least owned by the Smithsonian. It's the one that belonged to Prince Paula de la Sol, and it's in the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So I'm going to fire these up. I know they do power on. That I've already determined. That's all I've determined. When I power them on, by the way, this one says, the operating system says HR-16B. It should not say B. It should just say HR-16. So that already tells me that someone has cracked this one open and tried to swap out the chips. But I haven't done any further testing. Powering this one on is like taking your life in your hands because look at this sweet, sweet... This one comes from a church, Vineyard Ministries International. Of course, that probably means it's played a lot of praise music, which does decrease the resale value, but I could just dip it in some goat's blood, I think, at the end, and we'll be okay. Okay, so let's just take a look here. Do I have any sound? No. None of the pads are producing a sound. Okay, let's see if any of the patterns load. Ooh. Ah. We might need an exorcism. I'm going to see if I can get a pattern to load. I'm going to go to pattern mode. I'm going to select a pattern. Pattern 1, for example, which should work. Whoops, pattern 11, fine, whatever. Press play. No sound. So we know that the volume is working because that random bass drum seems to function. So it's not an out problem. One thing about patterns is that there is an internal battery, and when the battery dies, it will lose all pattern memory, and you have to upload new patterns to it. But I'm not even getting the ability to create sound with the pads. So I'm going to do a self-test. The way you do a self-test on these machines, you get you're going to plug in the tape output and tape input, and with a MIDI cable, you're going to plug in MIDI in and MIDI out, and that's going to allow this machine to test all its parameters. And if you're thinking, this seems like a lot of work for something that there's a free VST plugin for, you're absolutely right. So self-test mode, actually, you hold down Quant and MIDI and power up. It says running diagnostics, all RAM okay, testing EPROM, error in EPROM. I bet this is related to the fact that it says HR-16B when I fire it up. I bet someone has cracked this open and tried to replace the chips with aftermarket chips, and they're not working. Huh. There may be no screws holding this unit together. It may just be the funk of 40,000 years, because I don't see any screws in any of these holes. Whoa, okay. Yeah, there's nothing holding this together. So I'm just gonna crack it open. Yep. It's just gunk. Okay. When you crack these open, you'll see that you've got some ribbon cables that connect the pad board to the main board, and you've got a ribbon cable that connects to the screen there. And you can also see quite clearly, here, let me take the ribbon cables off so you can see clearly. Someone has attempted to replace the sound cards. These ribbon cables just pop off. Sorry, you can't see that. They really just squeeze them and they come off. Okay, so, and then there's one that holds the volume and data slider to the board. And then it separates into two clean halves. And there we go, top and bottom. Put the top aside for a moment. Looks like someone decided they wanted the sound of the Lindrum. So we have two Lindrum EPROMs here and one operating system for the HR-16B. And this is where it's telling me the problem is. Also, this is the battery, and I'm looking at the date on that battery. I don't know if you can read this, probably not. It says 5/12/1988. Yeah, what were you doing in May of 1988? Because that's when this battery was installed. So first thing, we got to get rid of these EPROMs. We got to replace these with proper EPROMs. And you can, I happen to have a bunch of HR-16 junk laying around, including I think some functional EPROMs. So I'll use those. And otherwise you could buy these online for probably 30 bucks. Yeah, and they really do pop in and out pretty easily. The only thing you have to remember is which one goes where. All right, here I go. Oh, so look at that. So this is labeled, very clearly labeled 15 for chip 15, and this is the 16 slot. So somebody just reversed these. And now the operating system chip. Look at that, 1988, 8/25/1988, and that says 5/12. So these are factory correct chips, which makes no difference at all. So one thing you got to do when you put these in is make sure they're aligned the right way. You'll see that these chips have little divots in them, and you'll see that the sockets have little divots too. So don't put them in backwards. I'm also just going crazy with this screen, this crappy screen that is not legible. So I'm going to replace the screen. You can buy screen replacements for about 30 bucks or so. It seems like everything with the HR-16 costs 30 bucks. So I do in fact have some aftermarket blue screens. I'm just going to drop one in. Okay, new screen, new chips. I think I'm just going to replace that battery while I have it cracked open. So to do that, of course, you do have to pull the board out. And the board is held in place by some screws. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like someone has used some delightful all-purpose home screws for that. So I got my solder sucker, got my soldering iron. I'm just going to mark positive so I don't forget. Okay, you have to take this new battery and kind of bend the legs to get close enough to the holes in the board. There is kind of a little tongue and groove situation going on here, so you actually do want to sort of lift it and set it in like that. There we go. Let's go for power on. Hey, ALESIS HR-16. Awesome. Let's see if we have sounds. Now let's see if any of the patterns have loaded. So I'm going to go pattern 1. Look at that screen, it's much brighter now. Okay, no patterns are loaded. That's because I changed the battery and that took out all of the pattern memory. So now I have to load patterns using a sysx file, and I'll show you how to do that here. Okay, so if you now want to load all of the original sequencer data on the HR-16, you can do that by using what's called a sysx file, which was the old school way that we would communicate data to these machines. So you need a MIDI managing program. MIDI aux is one that I use because it's open source and easy to work with. You're going to download that, and then you're also going to get the original sysx file, which you can find in many dark corners of the nerd internet, just literally by Googling HR-16 sysx, S-Y-S-E-X, and you'll get that file. Need to make sure that MIDI aux knows what MIDI device you're using. So in my case, it's my little Focusrite. And of course, you're going to go a MIDI cable from out from your audio interface to the in of your HR-16. Then you can go View, go down to sysx, open up the command window, and then you're going to load the file, HR-16 factory presets. And you don't have to tell the, there it is, you don't have to tell the SR-16 to do anything. You're just going to send it the data and it will receive it. So now you're going to go to command window to send the file, send sysx. And once you click that, it'll start sending all that original sequencer data to your HR-16. The HR-16 window says receiving MIDI data, and that's it. It's now got all of the original songs and patterns. Okay, all loaded. Let's try a pattern now. Pattern 22. Cool. Volume sliders. Volume slider works, although I am going to want to fix these janky knobs, and the data slider works too. So I'm now just going to do one more self-test just to make sure that everything's okay. When you do the self-test, it will actually, again, erase all the presets, so you're going to have to load it one more time, but that's okay. Quant and MIDI and power on. Diagnostics. Testing RAM. All RAM okay. Testing EPROM. EPROM okay. LED test. Oh, I think I'm supposed to respond. Nope. MIDI in and out test. MIDI in and out okay. Tape in and out test. Not that you'd ever need that. Okay. DAC offset. And that is an adjustment that you can make if there's too much noise in the samples. But I don't need to do that, so I'm just going to push continue. And there we go. And I bet that erased all my patterns. Yes, it did. So I'm going to reload the patterns, but that's basically it. We have revived this machine from the dead, and now I'm going to clean it and find four more screws to go in the back and replace these sliders, and we will turn our attention to the holiest of HR-16s. All right, so this is the second HR-16. This one actually looks to be, aside from the fact that it's just wretchedly filthy. By the way, I am going to clean these. I use isopropyl alcohol, because yikes. This actually doesn't look to be in too bad a shape. The sliders are stiff. They'll need some pot cleaner. The screen is ruined. But physically, I'm not seeing a bunch of damage. Oh, I forgot. I am. It's this thing, right? So somebody dropped that and snapped it off and then resoldered it inside. Can't wait to see what that looks like. Well, let's do a sound test. God, every time I power this thing on, I'm like, it's just held together by tape.
Be extra careful, okay?
Hey, we got sound. All the pads work. Sweet, so we got sounds. And let's see if we have patterns. We do not have patterns. Probably because the battery is dead. So let's crack it open. Let's do the screen and the battery and run a diagnostic. When they put these little piezos in, whoever pressed them down, you can usually see their thumbprints. I don't know why, but I kind of dig that. It's like I have the thumbprints of someone in California in 1988. Yeah, so what's happened here is they've actually, it looks like maybe the barrel got snapped off in some wild movement, and they tied an underwriter's knot and just soldered directly to the board, which isn't, I guess, the worst thing in the world. It's a fix that will hold, but I think I would rather replace that with a proper barrel jack, because otherwise you're lugging this thing around forever, and you know, meh. All sounds good. HR-16 has two faders. These faders are both 10K 60 millimeter travel linear taper faders, potentiometers. And the only difference between them is that the volume potentiometer is dual gang, so it controls two circuits effectively for each output, each set of outputs, and the data is a single gang. And these, here's what happens always. The stem breaks. It breaks off, leaving you with a potentiometer that can only be activated with a screwdriver. And what's maddening about this is that they have a couple of weird things about them that make finding a replacement difficult. First, that's the shaft there. It is 10 millimeters long, which is a little funky, and 4 millimeters at the tip to accommodate these ALESIS sliders. So that's a little weird. And then, to make it even weirder, the setup for the dual gang potentiometer involves, potentiometers have 3 pins, and here they're in groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Whereas in most other potentiometers that you'll see if you just order one, if that's dual gang, it's arranged 4 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Now, if you know how a potentiometer works, it's not hard to figure that out. But anyway, it's a little tricky to find a replacement. This is the part where if I was doing an infomercial, I'd be like, oh, what a hassle. If you just go on Google and say ALESIS HR-16 slider, somebody is going to take advantage of you. You're going to pay $9.99 or $14.99, and you have to clip off the end, or $25 per potentiometer. Don't do that. Don't be that guy, because the potentiometer that fits perfectly, the TI Electronics BI Technologies model PS60 potentiometers. So for volume, it's PS60 20MC, 1BR 10K. And for data, it's PS260 10MC, 1BR 10K. They cost exactly $1.44 each plus shipping, or maybe $3 if you get them from, I think, Mauser. And these work great. Now there are other ones that'll work too. I'll put a couple of other models up. Borns makes one that's fine, but I can't find one in stock anywhere with a 10mm shaft, so you have to clip it, which is annoying. Alpine makes one that's also fine. I just don't find them in stock as much, and they're a little more expensive. So here you go. Here's your solution. Obviously, you take off the 4 screws in the back, which I've already done. You're going to remove these knobs. They pull straight up. Don't lose them. It's easy to do. These faders, by the way, they're just really stiff and rusty, and they're kind of scratchy. But at least they're in place. And these are held in place just by Phillips screws here. You can see how this particular fader has groups of 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3 together. And the colored wires go to those pins in a way that is based on the particular revision of your board. But it shouldn't matter. I'll show you what those revisions look like, but it shouldn't actually matter because it should be correct in your unit, so you just have to replace them as they are. You do have to pull the mounting plate off of the old one, which is just 2 slotted screws. This part is the hardest if you have troll hands. Great. Now the data slider is a little bit easier because it's just 3 wires, but again, take a picture with your phone because you don't want to forget which way those go. It'll drive you crazy. Look at that lint. That's quite a potentiometer lint collection in that one. Yikes. Okay, let's put it back together and see if it works. These should pop right back on. And of course, if you don't like those, you can use any old slider you want. I kind of like the slightly more raised ones, but I don't know, there's something classic about the ALESIS ones, I guess. Success!